Chapter 3, Statistics for Business. In this chapter, we're going to find out how we can describe categorical data. So we talked about two different types of variables, categorical variables, numeric variables. Now we're going to go into details about categorical variables. And there are two types of categorical variables, ordinal, when there is an order, and nominal, when there is no order. So how do we describe categorical data, categorical variables? There are three major types. You can describe it with a frequency table, a table which just has a summation of all of those categories and ordered by the ones that has the highest category order first. So let's say you are trying to show for a given website where are the traffic coming from. So you can have a host, number of visits, and the proportion. So you can do that with a frequency table, and you can do this in Excel using a pivot table. So let's say you have requests coming in, you can summarize and aggregate that all for all of the incoming hosts and the number of visits, the total. Once you have the total, you can find out the proportion of the total compared to the total visits. So frequency table is a one good way to summarize. If you're trying to summarize categorical variables, then frequency table is a good one. The other way you can do it is using a bar chart. Here it's very clearly saying that, hey, abc.com has like 0.57. So this could be 0.57, etc. And you can easily see that, hey, Microsoft.com had 0.25, 0.57, etc. So when you're trying to do the comparison, which is easy to see in the category, like, hey, this is bigger than this one, and it's also easy to see like how they compare. Then you use a bar chart. It's good for ordinal variables, but it's not really good for nominal variables, right? Like if you have an order, then it's good to see it in a bar chart. But proportion is a good one. With a pie chart, you can see proportion. So if you're trying to show what percentage of population has, let's say, an Android device versus an iPhone device, then this is a good one. But if you're trying to show growth over time, then it may very well be that, hey, Android still has, like, let's say 50% 10 years ago, and then now it still, let's say, has 50%. But this doesn't show you growth. It still just says the proportion is the same. But if you want to see the comparison of growth year over year, then you probably want to show bar chart. So there are different ways of showing data and describing data. And so which one you use for your analysis, it's important for you to play around. Like what is looking good? What is actually answering the question at hand? Remember the motivation? It's important to understand what is the motivation behind what data analysis you're doing, what decision you're trying to get at, and which chart actually looks good. Once you have described it in a good chart, then you also want to have some way to compare, right? So that's where these two metric comes in, mode and median. Mode is the most common, right? Mode is the most common. In this case, abc.com is the mode. We can also say this is the modal behavior, right? That abc.com has the maximum traffic coming. So most common is a mode. So if you order your data and then you find out which one is the most common or the highest frequency, then that's mode. And that'll give you what is the modal behavior, or what's the dominant behavior, what's the most common behavior. That's mode. Median is when you order your ordinal data and you find the middle point. Right? If you find the middle point, if you have, let's say, 10 data points, then 5th and 6th divide by 2 or something like that. If you have 11 data points, then it's the 6th one. So finding out the middle one, that's the median. And it's important to know these metrics. Let's take a concrete example. Barnes and Nobles heavily has stores, but in distribution mechanism that they use stores. Then they can have books that they can shelf and then sell. Amazon, on the other case, have big distribution data centers, right? And they can host many more books. And more than 50%, based on what I read in this chapter, more than 50% on Amazon sales came from the longer tail of books that are not even stocked by Barnes and Noble, right? So it's important to understand, like, what is your data? Like, if you see that it has a long tail, then just looking at mode might not be helpful. Taking a look at the median might be helpful to understand, like, hey, what kind of data you have and where, like, let's say this is fees data. Then if you have more fees even for few customers on the extreme right, and that's important. You don't want to just look at the modal behavior, because that'll just tell you the best case scenario of how many people are paying least fees. But if you want to find out, then you probably want to look at median and also mean, which is, what is that point which balances the two sides. And median does balance, and mean is swayed away more and more towards the extremities, right? It's actually the average. So it's important to understand, like, comparison metrics. It's important to use the right charts or the right mechanism to summarize, so that your categorical data actually is understood easily. Because let's say you use this for categorical variable proportion with pie chart. It's not that useful. It's very hard to compare 50% over 51%, let's say over 10 years. But if you did it here, you quickly see, like, hey, Amazon, let's say this was Apple, this is Android, and year over year it's actually like 50, it's still 50, but then it's growing at a much larger pace, right? So with bar charts, and this is the other side of this, you can also point it this way. So using the right chart is important for the right variable. So that the first step, you need to understand the data, understand the metadata. Once you understand the metadata, you can use the right variable to plot it, and then you can use the right metric to actually compare that data. And you can't use anything that doesn't make sense. In all of this, right, the most important learning that I had was don't mislead. Because let's say in this bar chart, if you have it's not 0 as a starting point, but let's say you start at, let's say, 1,000 or 20 or 1,000 or something, then the area principle is not covered. Area principle is basically what it shows is what it is. There's nothing like behind. So if you don't use the right starting point here, then it's misleading, because you can easily miss out. Or if this proportion is bigger than this, but actually this is smaller, then this is misleading. This should only be bigger if it's actually bigger in proportion for the ordinal variable. So don't mislead with data. Don't mislead. It's very easy to mislead. So make sure that you use the right chart. Don't mislead. Use the right area principle to govern how you show your plots. Even frequency table, it's easy to create this in Excel. Excel has the statistic tool that you have to enable, and you can use a pivot table to create a frequency table. And from frequency table, you can create all of these fancy charts in Excel. So we're going to learn how to do that. But this is very important to understand the type of data, and we went into detail of describing categorical data. Thanks.